Okay, we are back for round two of meal prepping hacks to help you make meal prepping a little less stressful and set you up for success for weight loss, maintenance, and yes, even weight gain. Yes, that still takes a little planning if you want to do it the right way. So, on to our first tip for this short presentation. Okay, so before you even get started with meal prep, one of the first things we need to do is do some organizing or reorganizing. If you're having to sit there and dig around the fridge every time you open it up, we might be a lot more prone to getting frustrated and just reverting back to some of our old habits. So make room by tossing out old items, designate space for different types of foods, and make space for your prep meals so that you're able to easily access it. And make sure to organize your cupboards as well. For people with roommates, you may want to discuss kind of how you want to organize your cupboards in your fridge so that everyone is on the same page there. You may also want to take time to pack the things up that perhaps are keeping you from sticking to your well-intentioned plans. Either give them away or put them in places that are maybe a bit harder for you to access, and even in places that are out of sight, out of mind. So things like cookies, snack cakes, candy, etc. Now, I'm all about moderation, and I don't believe there is any inherently bad food, but you do have to recognize and acknowledge those weaknesses that you do have. We all have them, and we need to try to do our best to avoid them. So the goal is not to demonize or even deny ourselves completely from these things, but let's at least try to get ourselves off temptation island as much as we can here. So the next step of organization is getting storage for your new and improved meals. I personally like the types of containers that allow you to separate the main items of each meal, but there's a lot to choose from. They can vary in size, shape, and material. The ones I bought off Amazon several years ago, just little plastic meal containers that are still holding up. Yeah, some of them may need to be replaced, but if you know me, I'm not too fond of spending money when I don't have to. So, but you also may want to consider getting various sizes for different items, specifically snack items like crackers and nuts. Sandwich size Ziploc bags might even do for these things. Typically, I find that most of the time, if people don't pre-measure and sort these snackable items out ahead of time, they're more likely to overeat. It's real easy to lose sight of how much you're eating when you're snacking from the entire bag. It will also make it a little easier to monitor your food intake, even if you're not directly tracking from a meal tracking app like MyFitnessPal or even Fitbit. So on to measurement tools. So these measurement tools aren't just necessary for entire recipes. They're also very useful for measuring out individual food items, things like just a serving size of almonds or measuring out a cup and a half of strawberries, whatever it may be. So while there are various ways that you can do this, some more accurate than others, I do have to be honest, you at least need to start somewhere. And a great place to start is just by using a portion size guide. Some guides you might come across use common items like perhaps a deck of cards to indicate an approximate amount of protein, for example. Other guides actually use your own hands. So as you can see here on this slide, an example of this might be using the palm of your hand to give you a good idea of what 3 to 4 ounces of protein might look like. So, like I said before, there are more accurate ways to go about this. This isn't always the most accurate, understandably. Hand sizes vary quite a bit, but I do understand that tracking can be a little bit overwhelming, so it's a good way to start. And it's just a good way to make us more mindful of how much we're eating. But for improved accuracy, I definitely recommend investing in a food scale and some measuring cups. All are relatively affordable. The next tip is to stock up on things that you use routinely or will use routinely, you can buy in bulk to store in the pantry or even freeze. So things like olive oil, spices, oatmeal, grains like quinoa, couscous, pasta and rice, beans, canned veggies, and even frozen veggies, which are my go-to. So stocking up on the staples like these will make shopping less frequent and cheaper in the long run if you can buy in bulk. One hack that I don't personally use, but I see can be very helpful for some, is to celebrate food with devoted days of the week. This could help make planning easier to predict and narrow down options. Having too many options can make things a bit more stressful. If you have to, so having some sort of framework will make planning easier and a lot less mentally taxing. If you have kids, this is also an awesome idea because it gets them a little bit more excited about trying new things for these particular days and food in general. So let's talk consistency. I talk about consistency all the time in terms of you're sticking to the plan, but same goes, I think, for meal planning. So decision fatigue is actually a real psychological term. It's defined as the deteriorating quality of decisions made by an individual after a long session of decision making. So when you think about it, and our everyday lives are filled with decisions, and these decisions, because it can be so mentally taxing throughout the day, ultimately lead to an impairment of self-regulation, which can play a role in things like impulse buying, whether or not we exercise, and even what and how we're eating. So how do we combat this? Well, meal planning and meal prep in itself is one way to reduce decision fatigue, but we can also tackle decision fatigue even within meal prep itself. One way I found that has been beneficial for me and for some others that I've worked with is to cut down on the options I have and to keep things consistent as far as what I'm eating, at least on a weekly basis. You can change things up slightly the next week. For variety, I think variety is still important because you're getting different nutrients for different types of foods. But for example, perhaps throughout the weekday you keep maybe your breakfast, lunch, and snacks relatively similar and pick out maybe 2 dinners to rotate through. Specifically if you are celebrating days like I talked about in the last tip. Or if you're like me, you can just eat pretty much the same thing every day, which makes it definitely a lot easier and requires a lot less decision making. Then, like I said, the next week you can change out the ingredients or just a couple meals. Say you come across maybe a new recipe that you want to try. But the bottom line is to keep it simple so that you are feeling less stress as far as making decisions, and you're setting yourself up for success, because when you're less stressed about making decisions, you're more likely to make better decisions. Alright, so that is it for our second video for meal prep hacks. If you did not get a chance to see the first one, you can make sure to go back and watch that one. You can find that also on our YouTube page. Again, there's a lot of tips here. You don't have to use every single one of them. I don't even use every single one of them, but definitely, I definitely challenge you to find a system for meal prepping that is going to work for you. There's a lot of things that we can't control in life. So, in order to make the change in our lives that we really want to see, we've got to focus on the things that we do have control over. So if you haven't, done meal prepping, or maybe you haven't found a system that works for you, make sure to try some of these tips out. Now is the time to start putting them to use if you haven't already.